Okay, so here in 3.4, we're talking about a method of solving systems of linear equations that's called elimination. Now, in elimination, what you want to do is you want to make sure that your x's are lined up and your y's are lined up and your constants are all lined up, all right? They line up vertically, one on top of the other. Now, we know that these are all in standard form, so another way of saying this would just be to get both of your equations into standard form. Now, the other important thing, in addition to having them both in standard form, is to make sure that the coefficients of one of your variables, either x or y, not necessarily both, just one or the other, they have to be opposites of each other. So if one is positive 3, the other would be negative 3. If one was negative 4, the other would be positive 4. You want to make sure you have opposite coefficients. Now notice the y coefficients are different, and that's okay because as long as we have one of the variables with opposite coefficients, we are okay. So let's go ahead and solve this. All you have to do using the elimination process is add all the x's together, add all the y's together, and then add all the constants together. So 3x minus 3x is 0. These eliminate. 2y minus 6y is negative 4y. And 5 minus 21 is negative 16. All right, now we can go ahead and solve for y. We divide both sides by negative 4, and we find out that y is equal to positive 4. And again, I already wrote the solution over here, so we know the answer is 4. How do I know that already? Well, because I graphed this on Desmos, right? So I got both of these answers, both of these equations graphed, and we find out that they meet at negative 1, 4. So now that we know the y value is in fact 4, we can go ahead and find the x value. To find the x value, I can plug in the 4 into either of these two equations. Again, do whatever's easiest, so I think maybe the top one would be a little bit easier because it has smaller numbers. So I'm going to take this 3x plus 2y, but again, instead of the letter y, I'm going to plug in the 4, because y is 4, equals 5. All right, so that's just coming from that top equation. And then we have 3x plus 8 equals 5. We'll subtract 8 on both sides, and then we'll divide both sides by 3. And we find that x is negative 1, and that is what we would expect to get, all right? So we do get an answer of x is negative 1 and y is 4. All right, if we do a second problem, now notice that this one is not quite set up for us yet, right? This is not in standard form, so I'm going to have to go ahead and subtract 5x on both sides. That's going to give me negative 5x plus y equals negative 3. And then I'm just going to copy paste that bottom equation. All right. So now I have everything in standard form, right? My x's are lined up, my y's are lined up, and my constants are lined up. But notice that nothing would eliminate, right? If I just add these rows together, nothing would eliminate. And that's the whole point of this. So I'm going to have to multiply one of my equations by something such that I will get some cancellation to happen. So if I'm smart about this, if I look at the negative 5 and the 4, well, I would actually have to multiply both equations by some number to get these to be the same. Even easier, though, I could look at this top equation, and I could multiply every single term by negative 2. If I did this, multiply every single term by negative 2, I should notice that this positive 2y on the bottom and negative 2y on the top would cancel out. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up multiplying this whole top equation by negative 2. All right, you get to pick what this number is. Depending on the problem, you get to pick. All right, don't do times negative 3 because that's not going to allow anything to cancel. Don't do times 7 because nothing's going to cancel. So my new system of equations would be positive 10x minus 2y equals positive 6. And then I'm going to copy paste that second equation again. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and add all these together because I have these are opposite coefficients, right? A negative 2 and a positive 2 will eliminate. So 10x plus 4x is 14x. These eliminate, and that's going to equal 0, right? 6 minus 6 is 0. I can divide both sides by 14, and we figure out that x is 0. And again, that's what we should expect to get. If I were to graph this, I would see that they intersect where x is 0. Now that I know x is 0, I can plug it back into either of these two equations to find y. I'm going to choose the top one. I think it's a little bit easier. So y equals 5, but we know we're going to replace x with 0 minus 3. So y equals 0 minus 3, which is just negative 3. And again, that should check out because that is the answer that we know we should get if we were to graph it. All right. So again, make sure it's in standard form. And then once it's in standard form, you get to choose what number to multiply one of the equations by such that you get elimination to happen. All right. Again, you want it to be opposite coefficients, right? Positive 2 and negative 2, or positive 6 and negative 6, right? The last one here, now these are both in standard form, right? We have the x's, then the y's, and then the constants, ax plus by equals c. So everything is lined up for me, but notice that I don't have any opposite coefficients here or here. So nothing's going to eliminate right now. And if I choose to multiply one of my equations by some value, I'm still not going to get any cancellation to happen because notice 2 and 3 don't have any common factors besides 1. Same thing is true with 2 and 5. So what, again, you get to choose to do is multiply, in this case, both equations by some number. Again, you're trying to get them to cancel. So what I'm going to do in the first equation, I'm going to multiply the top equation by 3, and I'm going to multiply the bottom equation by 2. All right, and you should see why this is really helpful to me in just a second. So my new top equation, if I multiply every single term by 3, is going to be 6x minus 15y equals negative 27. And on the bottom, we're going to multiply 2 by every single term. That's going to give me a negative 6x plus 4y equals negative 28. Now at this point, you should see why I chose these two numbers. I chose these two numbers because it now will allow me to use elimination, right? The 6 and the minus 6 will cancel out. So these will eliminate. When I add these, we get negative 11y. And when I add these, we get negative 55. I can divide both sides by negative 11, and we figure out that y is 5, which again, we know this is the answer. If I were to graph these two lines, this would be the intersection point. So now that we know y is 5, I can pick either of these equations to plug in y back into. So let's do the second one. Looks a little bit smaller number. So negative 3x plus 2y, but we're replacing the y with a 5, equals negative 14. So negative 3x plus 10 equals negative 14. We'll subtract 10 on both sides, so that gives me negative 24 on the right. And when we divide by negative 3, we do get x equals 8, and that is what we should expect to get. All right, so we know that 8 comma 5 is going to be my answer. Now the nice thing about this is that you get to choose, right? Again, it is your choice. So if I were to take this same problem, 2x minus 5y equals negative 9, and negative 3x plus 2y equals negative 14, another thing I could do is instead of trying to get the x's to cancel, I could try to get the y's to eliminate. That would require me multiplying the top by 2 and the bottom by 5. And let's see what happens when I choose these numbers. Well, on the top, we get 4x minus 10y equals negative 18. And on the bottom, we get negative 15x plus 10y equals negative 70. And so if we add these together, we've got 4 minus 15 is negative 11x. These cancel, and that equals negative 88. So if we divide both sides by negative 11, we get x equals positive 8. And would you look at that? That's the answer that we would expect to get. And so then if I plug in an 8 for x, we get y as 5. All right? So again, it doesn't matter how you choose that process, but just be selective about which numbers you choose, right? Be intentional. Don't just pick like a 4 and a 7 or negative 3 and 8, right? You have to be intentional about what numbers you pick because you want this elimination to happen.